As you can see, I've surrounded myself with Russian ambience. At least I've tried to. We have the flag of the Imperial Russian Empire. We have a photograph blown up of Rachmaninoff at his summer home, Ivanovka, around the time he was correcting the third piano concerto. It's around 1908. This is from St. Petersburg. And of course, my teacher was Russian and also a graduate of the St. Petersburg Conservatoire. She graduated, the bad luck to graduate in 1917, and had a similar story to his of Exile. Rachmaninoff is well loved. The music is well loved everywhere in the world because it's irresistible. It is so warm and rich and powerful and expressive. He was really compositionally the product of Liszt and Tchaikovsky. Liszt was the last of the great 19th century pianist composers. But in contrast to Rachmaninoff, Liszt stopped performing when he was 36. Rachmaninoff kept going until a week before his 70th birthday. Tchaikovsky was his idol. He had a huge portrait of Tchaikovsky hung in his house, and they were friends. He was a mentor. Tchaikovsky graded his final examination as he graduated from the Moscow Conservatory of Music. And the number system there is from 1 to 5, 1 low, 5 high. And Rachmaninoff was given fives, all fives, for composition and piano and conducting. And Tchaikovsky came and added plus, 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 besides the fives. And then he was subsequently awarded the Great Gold Medal, which had only been given twice before. So this is an outstanding, hugely talented man who had a tremendous amount of turbulence in his life and struggles. We know about the major interruptions like the Russian Revolution, but there were also private demons. He suffered from depression. And it was a struggle. His life was always a struggle from his childhood. He was very introverted, this tall, angular man. He was 6'6" and had enormous hands. My hands, I can reach a good 10th, okay? On the keyboard, that would be from C to E, all right? So imagine going from C to E and then easily reaching up to G, 2 more white notes up to G. So they're just phenomenally huge hands. And of course, he wrote his music for himself. He started out as a composer pianist, not a pianist composer. He thought of himself as a composer first. He was very private about his private life. And his daughter, Irina, wrote about him at the end of his life. Father could be sociable only within a circle of intimate friends. And here too, his sociability had a clearly defined limit that he never passed. As for his emotions and inner feelings, he seldom articulated these in words. In general, he was very stingy with words. This may be why he disliked interviews so much and did all he could to avoid them. I remember well how he once said to someone in my presence that words are useless for such a purpose, that all he felt and experienced was told far better, more clearly and truthfully in his compositions, and also found expression in his playing. A brilliant, introverted man who started life with a happy family out in the country on a large estate. But he had a father who was a wastrel, who gambled away and frittered away until the estates that his mother had brought as a dowry into the marriage, 5 pieces of property, all finally had to be auctioned to pay off the father's debts. And then the family moved into a crowded, not very comfortable rental apartment in St. Petersburg instead of being out in the country. And the little boy was running wild. The parents separated. She kicked him out finally, and they had to say what to do with this wild child who had such a musical talent, and they enrolled him in the St. Petersburg Conservatory. But he could easily pass all the musical classes because of his natural ability. He was so talented, and he skipped all the general subjects. He would go out and cut classes, ride the streetcars. They were horse-drawn streetcars in those days, and he would run behind and jump onto the back of the streetcar was one of his favorite things to do. So he just cut school all day. And when the time came to present the report card to his mother, he had gotten all ones in his subjects. So clever boy, he changed the ones, the low mark, to fours, thinking that she wouldn't notice and he could get away with this bit of deception. But of course he was caught, and the conservatory got in touch with her, and then they decided this is not working and he was going to be expelled. So his cousin, Alexander Siloti, got him into the Moscow Conservatory. And this is a tough environment. He was a boarding student at the home of his piano teacher with 3 or 4 other boys, and they were on a military-like schedule. The first one had a shift at 6 a.m. to get up and practice, and they had rotating shifts. They had to practice 3 hours a day and go to school. Now let's look at some pictures. There's some wonderful early photos that have survived from those early days. There's 3, little, about 10 years old. That's about the age when he got expelled from the St. Petersburg Conservatoire. And then the next one, beautiful teenage boy with that's the most hair you will ever see him with. He adopted a common military or convict hairstyle of very closely cropped hair. 1888, we watch him mature, and you can see this serious face that does not smile for the camera. Never did. Very confident, but very much holding everything inside. Beautifully dressed. Huge influences on his music, the symphonies of Tchaikovsky and the orchestrations of Rimsky-Korsakov. When he left Russia, he took Rimsky-Korsakov's score of Le Coq d'Or with him. Tchaikovsky, of course, a mentor, and had helped him when he graduated from the Conservatoire in Moscow, giving him those extra marks and approved the gold medal. They became colleagues. They played things together, and they conducted each other's works, and it seemed like it was going to be a very, very fruitful professional relationship when Tchaikovsky suddenly died, and that threw him into a huge depression of sorrow. And he wrote a huge piano trio in honor of the memory of Tchaikovsky. There's Zerov, his teacher in Moscow with his cubs, he called them, all these little boys. And in that class was Scriabin. Rachmaninoff is standing just behind Zerov's left shoulder. He's the tallest one in the bunch there. Colleagues Scriabin and Joseph Levine was also in the Moscow Conservatory at the same time, of course, and Levine immigrated to New York about the same time that the Rachmaninoffs did. Shaliapin, the great bass, and Rachmaninoff were tremendous lifelong friends. Rachmaninoff wrote operas specifically for his voice, and they were performed. The Aleko, the first one, was accepted by the Bolshoi Opera Company in Moscow and was produced. And Joseph Hoffman, who he said was the greatest pianist in the world. There was a huge mutual admiration society between Rachmaninoff and Hoffman, and they were acknowledged to be the 2 greatest pianists of the age. But nothing but support and encouragement went back and forth there. There was no competitiveness or jealousy, only mutual admiration. After his mother kicked out the dad, and they were almost destitute, an aunt invited him to spend the summers at their summer estate, Ivanovka, which is south of Moscow, out in the fields, the agricultural fields. There's a nice description left by a sister-in-law of the area there. What you're looking at, the 2 black and white photos, are the original house. The blue and white, which looks like a theme park house, is a reconstruction from 2018. The original house was looted and burned in the Russian Revolution of 1917. So there was nothing to go home to after that time. Everything was lost. The property was also confiscated. But Sofia Satina writes, this is Rachmaninoff's cousin, the small village of Ivanovka adjoined our estate. Endless fields stretched around us, merging on the horizon with the sky. In the distance in the west, the belfry of our parish church, located 5 miles from Ivanovka. In the north, someone's windmill. To the east, nothing but fields. And to the south, our aspen forest. For many miles around the house, there's nothing but open fields, and the trees were a refuge for hares, foxes, and even wolves sometimes. Rachmaninoff loved to walk around this area, and they also, later in life, he had horses. He was a horseman, a very good one, and he was interested in breeding race horses. At one time, there were over 100 horses on the property. So that gives you an idea of the scale of the wealth and the amount of land that this family had. Now, casual summer photos. Look, nobody smiles for the camera. What is that about? Except he is almost smiling at the girl. I think he has a hand on her shoulder. And that might be his future wife, Natalia. And he had a dog he loved out there. And there was a lake. He could go boating and go swimming in the lake. So it was a healthy country lifestyle. There was also peace and quiet where he could compose. And most of his major works were composed during the summer at Ivanovka. Ladies in the afternoon, this is the Belle Epoque, right? The 1890s, and those hats. Imagine on a hot day. And I think our boy is bored and would not like to have his photo taken. Pensive. When he graduated with this great gold medal, he went from being, and that's Tchaikovsky's portrait on the photo on the left, hanging on the wall. He suddenly went from being, the star, the hero graduate of the conservatory, to being young and unemployed. And there wasn't much work for someone that young. He could teach piano lessons to other aristocratic families. He took a job at a girls' school for a while later on, and he tried to write music for quick cash. And the summer after he graduated, he tossed off this famous Prelude in C-sharp minor in about 2 days. It's full of the sound of bells, the huge tolling bells of the churches of Moscow and even in the country. He sold it to a publisher for about $20 in our money. No future royalties, it was just a cash sale and no copyright. But this one piece caught on like wildfire everywhere in the world. And if he had only put a copyright on it, it would have made him quite a fortune, which he could have used later on. There were many, many pirated editions in every country. And the blue one up in the upper right-hand corner there comes from the archives at Tor House. Una Jeffers had one in her library. And so everybody wanted to play this piece. There were even jazz swing band arrangements made of it by the big bands in New York City who played in the jazz clubs, including Duke Ellington. Later, he was being interviewed in 1909 on an American tour, and they always want to ask him about this prelude, and he was forced to play it at every concert. He says, since my arrival in this country, I have discovered some peculiar notions regarding the prelude and the circumstances of its creation. I'll tell you about it. When I graduated from the Moscow Conservatory, I was a boy of 18. Music was not a lucrative profession, even for those who have achieved fame. And for a beginner, it's usually desperate. After a year, I found myself out of pocket. I needed money, and I wrote this prelude and sold it to a publisher for what he would give. I realized, all told, 40 rubles out of it. That's about $20 in your money. Very little compensation, you'll admit, considering the sums the piece has earned for publishers. But in this case, the law of compensation has worked out nicely, and I have no reason to complain. So, sometime if you're curious, Google jazz swing band arrangement of C-sharp minor prelude. It's quite amusing, and actually he liked those arrangements. He thought they were pretty interesting and much more fun, and he got terrifically bored with this later in life because audiences always expected it. Like he couldn't leave the stage until he had played it. So I will play for you the Prelude in C-sharp minor. It was given nicknames by publishers like the Bells of Moscow or Moscow is Burning, or various figurative titles. But of course, Rachmaninoff had nothing to do with any of those titles. So, the bells of Moscow. I found something really interesting hidden in the end, the coda of that little piece. Rachmaninoff had a lifelong obsession with the Dies Irae, which is a chant from the Orthodox Church, Day of Anger. The tune of the Dies Irae is this. That he used that in the bells. He used that in the Isle of the Dead. He used it in Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini as a second theme. And I found it embedded in the end of this prelude. This is a technique that he often does where he has a pedal point. A pedal means you're holding a harmony, a same note in the bass. Here it's a C sharp every time. 2, 3. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 measures of this C sharp. And then above, there's also C sharp in the soprano. So you hear, but inside the harmony changes every bar. And embedded in an alto voice is the Dies Irae. I'll play that again and bring that out so you can hear. So here we go. There it is. So I think it's hidden. Just a special treat. Another instance of him using this technique, which you'll find through all of his pieces, in the beginning of the second piano concerto, this famous opening with the big chords. It's very similar to the end of the C sharp minor prelude. There's a pedal point on F. Everything is F. And the inner harmony changes. The top note remains the same, the bottom note remains the same, but it's a changing chromatic harmony inside, which builds up tremendous tension. Let me just play that for you. So be on the lookout for these kinds of passages. Okay, so. Those Russian melodies, they're not copies of a folk tune, they're just imbued with a Russian character. I have a picture of Alexander Siloti and Rachmaninoff. This is his cousin. Siloti is significant. He was one of the last pupils of Franz Liszt, an outstanding favorite pupil of Liszt. 10 years older than Rachmaninoff, and when he came back to Russia, he really helped him get into Moscow, and then with the help of Tchaikovsky, mentored him, and they remained lifelong, very close friends. They played concerts together, they read music together, and collaborated. And he helped Rachmaninoff, establish himself as a professional musician. It's also thought that Siloti was one of Tchaikovsky's lovers. Very interesting. Rachmaninoff decided to finally get married in 1902 to a first cousin, Natalia Satina. And to marry your first cousin, you have to get special permission from the church, the priest, and from the Tsar, the emperor himself, during the wedding ceremony. And he managed to get all this done with, whatever bureaucratic hurdles they had to jump through, they did it. And he wrote 12 songs to pay for the honeymoon trip. He got 3,000 rubles for writing these 12 songs, and that paid for the honeymoon, and they went all over Europe. And she was impressive. She also had studied piano at the Moscow Conservatory with his same teacher, Nikolai Zerev, and she had graduated. So it's a little bit like Vladimir Ashkenazy and his wife. You know, she's Icelandic, and they met at the Tchaikovsky competition where she was a competitor. So Natalia became the support system for Sergei, and they had two daughters. There's the first one as Irina, born about a year later after the honeymoon, and there they are back at Ivanovka. She must be about 5, 6 years old there with the dog. And then there was a second daughter born, Tatiana. Oh, and there's Isle of the Dead. Okay, this is a piece you might look up to listen to on YouTube. It's beautiful symphonic tone poem. It's about 20 minutes long, and it's drenched with treatments of the Dies Irae. Remember? It's all the way through the thing. And it was inspired by this painting. This painting was very, very popular in the day. A lot of people had it hanging in their homes. And there's another painting, the next one, there, the Return Home, that inspired a prelude, one of his preludes. The B minor prelude, it was Rachmaninoff's favorite, admittedly, and Moisevich, and he also, they had a conversation and said, you know, that B minor prelude is my favorite of yours, that all you've written, and it always makes me think of that painting, Die Heimkehr. But I said, that's astonishing, because that's what inspired me to write it. I had the same image in my mind when I wrote the B minor prelude, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. These two, that this painting must have been so popular, it's such a current image, that they both made the association independently with the B minor prelude. Okay, so if you look at this, I have trouble. The B minor prelude is profoundly sad. So what kind of a homecoming is this? This man, you can see the hilt of a sword on his left hip. He's leaning toward the cottage. It's the end of the day. It looks like the sun has already gone down. How long has he been away? He doesn't know what he's coming home to, I think. And it could be the children are grown and gone. The family may not even be there. It's a homecoming fraught with doubts and questions. So let me play that B minor prelude for you. Rachmaninoff had a profoundly strong streak of melancholy in his character, and this is one of the most gorgeous expressions of that melancholy. It's the Russian blues, I guess you would say. You know, it feels so good to feel so bad. It makes your heart hurt, but it makes your heart feel very full at the same time. What a piece. Um, not all his pieces are so drenched in sadness. The year that he married Natalia, he wrote a gorgeous prelude in E flat major, which I think reflects that happy season of his life. He wrote 24 of these preludes. 24, does that ring a bell? 24 preludes in every major and minor key, just like Bach, just like Chopin, homage to Bach, just like Debussy, homage to Bach. So his 24 preludes are again echo of homage to the well-tempered clavier. This one in E flat, Bach always had a thing about the number 3 and E flat major, 3 flats, right? So he would write a fugue in 3 sections that had 3 themes, triple fugue or 3 voices. Rachmaninoff, instead of writing a texture that's, chordal, like you've heard heavy chords with a melody in the C sharp minor prelude and in this B minor prelude, this one is purely contrapuntal. It's 3 melodic lines against each other. The first couple pages, they're really just 2 parts, and then to the end, it's 3 voices. It's a 3-part contrapuntal texture. And the thing I love about this piece is it's like a fractal. Everything is self-similar. The bass line moves in 16th notes. Here's the opening bass line. Okay, remember that. That's the bass line moving in 16th notes. Now, the main melody in the right hand moves 4 times slower. It's in quarter notes. Do you recognize that? It's self-similar. It's the same material. One is in augmentation, one is in diminution. And then he makes a 3rd voice come in that goes in contrary vote. I mean, it's brilliant, and it's contrapuntal, and it's also delicious, and there's not the Russian sadness. This one is the Russian feeling very warm and happy. Certainly one of the dreamiest, most beautiful pieces he wrote. Couple images more. Rachmaninoff on an ocean liner. He made his first American tour in 1909, and he absolutely hated it. It was a grueling schedule. You know, I don't know how many weeks, but it's playing every day. And then after a concert, getting on a train and traveling to another city and playing in that city the next day, and then getting on a train and traveling to another city. And it was exhausting. He was invited to become conductor of the Boston Symphony and the Cincinnati Symphony. He turned them down. Years later, those invitations would be renewed when he left 9 years later. But here's an ocean liner leaving, and I have another prelude that seems to me somehow echo that feeling of flight, of sailing away. You know how you stand on a boat and just stare at the horizon, and the seagulls follow you as you leave land. There are birds around for a while, and after a while, there's nothing. So here's the G sharp minor prelude. It was written about the same time as that B minor sad prelude. Here, there's no image clue of what this one was about, but he always associated his pieces with images. They were just kept secret. He didn't reveal what they were, but he was inspired by short stories and poems and paintings. That first tour, 1909, they're on the ocean liner, okay, then moving ahead. The second tour, after the revolution, they had a terrible time. He played his last concert in Russia about September 15th. The Russian Revolution exploded on October 25th, and everything stopped. All his work, every avenue of work was to him was blocked, as a conductor, as a composer, and as a performer. It was horrible. The family was frightened. In their apartment building, suddenly he had to attend meetings about how things would be run in the apartment building, and was expected to take a shift as a night watchman. I mean, remember that scene in Dr. Zhivago when everybody moves into their apartment? I don't know if they had people moving in with them, but they had a really, really terrible time. And he had seen this coming for a long time. In 1917, he wrote to Silotes trying to get visas to find out if he could leave and how much money he could take with him, because he knew this storm was coming. So he writes, this is from a letter to his cousin. I have a favor to beg you to act on as quickly as possible. I'll be brief. First, a few sentences of explanation. I've spent almost in my entire earnings on the Ivanovka estate. It now represents an investment of about 120,000 rubles. Yet I'm able to write this off, for I see another crash in store for me. Besides, living conditions here seem so much better than there that I've decided not to return there. I have about 30,000 left, which is something, especially if I can work and continue to earn. But I fear another crash. Everything around me affects me so that I can't work, and I'm afraid of going completely sour. Everyone advises me to leave Russia temporarily, but where and how is it possible? Can you possibly help me on getting a passport for the entire family to at least go to Norway, Denmark, or Sweden? It makes no difference where, anywhere. Could I obtain such a permit by July? Can any money be taken? How much? Please let me know. Your S.R. Well, that didn't turn out. What happened was, the revolution exploded October 25th. 3 weeks later, he received an invitation to come to Stockholm and play for the royal family there. And it was a godsend, because he had a legitimate reason for leaving the country. It looked a little odd that the whole family was going, but they gave him permission. They could only take one suitcase each and 500 rubles each, which is really nothing. So they left on December 23rd. They were afraid they were going to be stopped on the train. The customs inspector stopped and went through all the luggage and was very suspicious about the books they were carrying, until he noticed, oh, these are children's school books. They had their 2 young daughters with them. They let them through, and they made it to the Finnish-Swedish border, and then they had to take a sleigh. This is December 23rd, to get to another train station to get to Stockholm. And they arrived absolutely frozen about midnight on Christmas Eve, just defeated, frozen, starving, exhausted, no money. And they spent that first few days in a hotel. A friend arranged for them to come to Denmark, and they shared a house where he could rent a piano and start organizing his life. And within a few weeks, he completed the concerts in Sweden. He played 12 concerts altogether in Oslo, Copenhagen, and Stockholm, and he earned enough money for passage so that the family could leave and come to New York. They landed in New York in November of 1918, just as the war was ending. The First World War was ending. And again, they went to their hotel, and that night there was a tremendous ruckus in the street. And thought, is this another revolution? What's happening here? And it was that the armistice had been announced. And the family got support. There were already many Russians living in New York who helped find a place to live, get a piano, arrange for work, find a manager, find a secretary who spoke English and Russian, and where to live. And he quickly had to make the decision that he would no longer be a composer conductor. Those avenues were closed because he had to make money to support his family. So he transformed himself into a touring virtuoso pianist. One of those early tours brought him in June out to San Francisco, and the Bohemian Club threw a luncheon in his honor and took his photo by a redwood tree. And that is the closest you will ever see him come to smiling in public. That photo in front of the redwood tree. And George Sterling, who was a good friend of the Jeffers and a Carmelite, wrote a sonnet for the occasion. Well, here is the sonnet written by George Sterling. You've probably read it by now as you waited for me to change this, but I mean, it was an auspicious beginning, and he knew that he would have work. The Boston Symphony wanted to hire him to conduct 110 concerts in 30 weeks, but he said, that's impossible. I don't know the repertoire. I don't have the repertoire, and I don't want to spend all my time just doing other people's music. It's not good. He had 2 other conducting offers. He turned them all down and took his chances as a touring virtuoso pianist, which meant now he had to really practice for the first time in his life, because he wasn't just playing his own music. He had to have a concert repertoire of Liszt and Beethoven and Mozart and Tchaikovsky and Bach. So it took tremendous effort, but he did it, and he worked like a dog to make this a success. His second piano concerto, which I played the opening for you, was a huge benefit on these tours, and it was often played. Next slide is Sergei Rachmaninoff, a fellow Russian. This guy got a free scholarship to the conservatory if he would study the double bass, because they were desperate for a double bass player, and he became the virtuoso double bass player of the era. He also became a very fine conductor, and he conducted his debut in Berlin with Rachmaninoff as soloist, playing the second piano concerto. This piece became so popular that it was demanded. It was like the most popular thing people wanted to hear. Even after he composed the third piano concerto, people really preferred, well, okay, you can play the third, but we'd really rather you play the second. And it became so popular that a popular song was later made of it in 1945. And this tune appeared in several movies as well. But I found the music. I was curious, this Rachmaninoff phenomenon. Certain of his pieces are so catchy and so compelling, like the C-sharp minor prelude, they become worldwide hits. His second piano concerto worked that way for him on the concert tour stage, but also it was arranged as a popular song in 1945. This is 2 years after he died. Look at this. Full Moon and Empty Arms. That is a baby Frank Sinatra, 1945. And they took the theme from the second piano concerto, the second theme of the third movement of the concerto, and turned it into a song. And since I found the actual music on eBay and bought it for $7, you're going to hear it today because it's delicious. And what I've done is Bob will come in, he'll be Frank Sinatra and sing Full Moon and Empty Arms, one verse, and then I will play that exact theme as it appears in the third movement of the second piano concerto. Fortunately, the pop song and the piano concerto are in the same key, so it makes a perfect connection. So you'll have Full Moon, Rachmaninoff theme from the second piano concerto, and then the reprise of Full Moon in proper pop song style.
Full moon and empty arms, the moon is there for us to share, but where are you? A night like this could weave a memory, and every kiss could start a dream for two. Full moon and empty arms, tonight I'll use the magic moon to wish upon use the magic moon to wish upon, and next full moon, if my one wish comes true, my empty arms will be filled with you.
It's delicious. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Rachmaninoff was the A-list soloist, and he worked with the best conductors. Kusevitsky was in Boston. Leopold Stokowski, also AKA Leo Stokes, was in Philadelphia, and they made a very close association. Lots of concerts and recordings together. Eugene Ormandy, also a Hungarian refugee, succeeded Stokowski in Philadelphia. Very close association, lots of recordings, lots of premieres. And Arturo Toscanini. Toscanini and Rachmaninoff had socialized together in Europe. They knew each other in Europe from concertizing. And Toscanini's daughter, Wanda, married Vladimir Horowitz. And Horowitz is like the next generation younger of virtuoso pianists coming out of Russia. And they all saw each other frequently. They saw each other in Switzerland, they saw each other in New York, and then eventually they all ended up in Los Angeles too at the same time. Stravinsky and Rachmaninoff did not really get on. Rachmaninoff did not understand modern music. His feeling was that after World War I, composers stopped writing with heart, and it was all just very intellectual. He was accused of being old-fashioned. He was accused of being stuck in the 19th century. It sounds like warmed over Tchaikovsky. Rachmaninoff couldn't let go, of course, of his romantic Russian roots. And why should he? He wrote, "I feel like a ghost wandering in a world grown alien. I cannot cast out the old way of writing, and I cannot acquire the new. I have made immense effort to feel the musical manner of today, but it will not come to me. Unlike Madame Butterfly with her quick religious conversion, I cannot cast out my musical gods in a moment and bend the knee to new ones. Even with the disaster of living through what has befallen the Russia where I spent my happiest years, yet I always feel that my own music and my reactions to all music remain spiritually the same, unendingly obedient in trying to create beauty. The new kind of music seems to come not from the heart, but from the head. Its composers think rather than feel. They have not the capacity to make their works exult, as Hans von Bülow called it. They meditate, they protest, analyze, reason, calculate, and brood, but they do not exult." So Stravinsky didn't think too much of Rachmaninoff, but they both ended up in Los Angeles later, and there was socially a rapprochement. It was difficult times. After a few years touring in the U.S., he would be in the fall. So his fall season would last from maybe October through January in the States. He could have 30 or more concerts, and then a tiny break, Christmas, and then Europe from February to May or April, another 30 or so concerts or 40 concerts. Exhausting. And then he would retire for the summer to a sweet country place where he could rest, recover, go to a spa, see a doctor, and perhaps compose. So I have some pictures of the property he acquired in Switzerland, Villa Senar. They found this piece of property on Lake Lucerne and wanted to build a house. There was a flat spot. And he's always trying to recreate the summers in Ivanovka, right? A beautiful place close to nature where the Russian friends could all come together and relax. By the time the end of the season came, Rachmaninoff was pretty much destroyed. I mean, he just hurt, his whole body hurt all over. And he took extensive weeks and weeks of rest. Sometimes he wouldn't play the piano, for 8 or 10 weeks just to rest and recover before he had to prepare for the fall season. But this beautiful location in Switzerland, they built the house in the 30s. Grandson established a foundation there, kind of like Tour House. That is, they own it. The Russian government wanted to buy it. They also wanted to move his remains from New York back to Russia, but all of these efforts were blocked. And the Rachmaninoff Foundation owns the property, and they have festivals, they have concerts, and I don't know what all there. There is some kind of programming that happens, but it has stayed owned by the canton of Lucerne, and the family is connected to it. Okay. And look how relaxed. That's almost a smile for the camera. It's a happy guy. He loved to go boating on this lake. And when there were grandchildren, the daughters were young, and when there were grandchildren, he would play with them and also take them out in the boat. He had a beautiful wooden boat, and he liked to go fast. Lovely times. Those two little kids are granddaughter Sophie and grandson Alexander. They're with his daughters, Irina and Tatiana, and with granddaughter Sophie is a tiny thing. And a good, smiling, happy dad, proud dad. En famille, he could relax in the summers. And write music. The first summer that he had Senar, he composed, for the first time in many years, a new piano piece. And these are the variations on a theme of Corelli. 1931, he wrote a set of variations. Now, 3 years later are coming the Paganini variations for piano and orchestra. And to me, this feels a little bit like a preparation, a study for the Paganinis. But he hadn't wanted to compose. He had no desire and no time and no energy. But this project has kind of lit him up. And he wrote this piece. He writes, I've just written a set of variations on a theme of Corelli. With all my travels and the absence of a permanent abode, I really have no time to compose. And when I now sit down to write, it doesn't come very easily, not as in former years. He was asked to play the variations from the manuscript, and he demonstrated it for this person. Said, sitting down at the piano, half reading from the manuscript and half playing from memory, with a miraculous facility, he went from one variation to another. In 12 variations, Rachmaninoff leads us through an ever-winding labyrinth of rhythmic and melodic figures. Then the onslaught of the tonality is made with a torrent of cadenzas. While playing it, he said, quote, all this mad running about is necessary in order to efface the theme, quote unquote. And out of the turmoil emerged a lovely, luxurious D-flat major, first in blocks of chords, this is variation 14, and then in the form of an enchanting Rachmaninoff nocturne. But its life was brief. The D minor hurried in once more and finally engulfed all. Here, Rachmaninoff hit upon an entirely novel device. The final variation, the coda, was neither a climax nor a return to the beginning. It opened up new perspectives, drew the conquered D-flat major into its orbit, and ended on a quiet, meditative note. After Rachmaninoff had played the variations, he looked at his hands. Quote, the blood vessels on my fingertips have begun to burst. Bruises are forming. I don't say much about it at home. Bruises are happening at any concert, but then I can't play with that spot for about 2 minutes. I have to strum some chords. It's probably just old age. And yet, take away from me these concerts, and it will be the end of me. He played through pain and eventually cancer, to keep playing until just barely a month before he died. But I would like to play the Corelli variations for you now. I will try. I'm hoping for no burst blood vessels in the fingers. It does come to quite a climax. My initial reaction to these, the theme is enchanting. It's an ancient Portuguese theme a saraband. And the story is that the original tune was a song about a poor shepherd who is in love. The girl chooses somebody else, marries someone else, and in despair, he throws himself off a cliff and kills himself. Good Russian style subject, right? A suicide for unrequited love. But I noticed the variations, there's a progression. I mean, the theme is a saraband, not unlike the theme of the Goldberg variations is a saraband. The first variation is of open texture with some cross hands, which feels like guitar figuration, could be an homage to Scarlatti. The second variation is in four voices, four linear voices, feels like an homage to Bach. And then they start a minuet and a waltz, and then variations that feel like characterizations maybe of Russian fairy tale characters. They get quite fantastic. It's quite a journey. There is an island of calm in the middle, this oasis of the D flat major, kind of chorale, saraband, and the nocturne, and then quickly ramping up to a big finish with a magical, mysterious coda. And it takes about 20 minutes to play. that beauty is hardly ever heard. Yeah, it's a hard piece, but it's fabulous, colorful, beautifully written piece, only 20 minutes long. I mean, the Chopin Sonata is 19 minutes, so it's not that long. Some of Rachmaninoff's pieces do reach to, it feels like it needs editing length. The fourth concerto, especially parts of the third concerto. I think the third concerto is 44 minutes long. The second concerto is only 24 minutes. That's a nice, reasonable length. 44 is getting out there. And the second or the third symphony is 65 minutes. And he does reach to this expansive length of things. But 3 years later, from when he wrote this, he wrote the Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini for himself to play. And again, it's not one of those I'm dying of homesickness and life is so hard pieces. It's playful, it's joyful, and it's playful. He had a huge success with it. And Michel Fokine, you may remember that name. He was a choreographer for the Ballet Russe, Diaghilev and Fokine. They mounted a lot of ballets, and they had the idea to create a ballet out of this Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini. And Rachmaninoff suggested the story. He suggested the program. He wrote to Fokine. Fokine was in Montreux. You could see Paganini already had a reputation as having sold his soul to the devil to enable him to play and do the spectacular tricks that he did playing the violin that no one else could do. Just unbelievable acrobatic tricks. So he already had this mystique about the dark side. Cartoons of him show him, the dance of death. So it didn't come out of nowhere that this story of the ballet. Here's Rachmaninoff writing to Fokine. Last night, I was thinking about a subject, and here's what came to mind. I'll give you only the main outlines, for the details are still foggy. Listen to the details. Consider the Paganini legend about the sale of his soul to the evil spirit in exchange for perfection in art and for a woman. All variations on the dies irae would be for the evil spirit. Remember, the dies irae is the second subject of the Paganini variations. The whole middle, from the 11th variation to the 18th, these are the love episodes. Paganini himself makes his first appearance at the theme, and defeated appears for the last time at the 23rd variation. The first appearance of the evil spirit is in the 7th variation, where it merges with the dies irae, blah, 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 all kinds of stuff. The 18th variation from this Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini, the theme is, that's the theme. So what he does, he inverts it instead of, if you think, and then make it major. So again, it's clever contrapuntal manipulation.